She called me a maid in front of everyone, not in a whisper, not in anger, but with a cold, deliberate smile while sipping champagne, as if she were announcing the weather. "So this is the girl you've been hiding," she said, tilting her head toward me. I almost mistook her for one of the housekeepers. Laughter rippled through the guests, soft and poisonous. My hands froze around the tray I had brought from the kitchen. I wasn't supposed to be serving tonight, but one of the staff had twisted her ankle and I offered to help, to support the family, to show respect. And now, I stood there, my cheeks burning, wearing the same black dress as the staff, while his mother's words sliced deeper than I could have expected. I tried to smile, to bow slightly, to act as if it didn't matter, but my heart was already collapsing in my chest. I saw her glance toward her friends, seeking their approval like a performer delivering her final line. And she got it. They chuckled, raised their glasses, and turned away from me as if I didn't exist. I should have walked out. I should have dropped the tray. But I stood there, frozen, like a child punished in silence, until I heard a chair scrape against the marble floor behind her. Then footsteps. Strong, deliberate. He stepped forward, eyes locked on her. Not with hesitation. Not with apology. With fire. "Say that again," he said, voice low and sharp. "And I swear you'll regret it." And the entire room went still. Everyone turned to him as if they couldn't believe he had actually spoken. His mother blinked, stunned for half a second, then tried to laugh it off. "Oh, come on, darling," she said, her tone light but her jaw tense. "It's just a joke. Why so dramatic?" But he didn't smile. He didn't even blink. He reached for my hand, right there in front of everyone, and took the tray from my trembling fingers, setting it aside like it meant nothing compared to me. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath until he gently pulled me closer to him, one arm shielding me from the crowd. His other hand pointed straight at her. "You insulted the woman I chose. You embarrassed her in front of strangers. And you did it in my house." The room stayed silent. Not a cough, not a whisper. His mother's mask cracked for just a moment, a twitch in her brow betraying her anger. "You're overreacting," she muttered. But the CEO shook his head slowly. "No, you're underestimating what love looks like." He turned slightly, facing everyone now, and his voice grew steadier, louder. "This is not just someone I brought here for fun. This is my wife. She's the reason I even stayed sane these last few years, and I will not let anyone, reduce her to less than that." I felt my throat tighten, a lump forming as tears threatened. No one had ever defended me like this. Not at a dinner table, not in front of the powerful, not like this. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I wasn't embarrassed anymore. I was overwhelmed, stunned. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. He still held my hand, firm but gentle, like he was reminding me I wasn't alone anymore. His mother's lips tightened, the elegant mask of grace slipping further with every second. "You brought shame to our name," she hissed, her voice low but cutting. "Look at her. She doesn't belong in this world. She never will." I looked down instinctively, years of being made to feel small, unworthy, forgotten. But then his hand lifted my chin, and he looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered in that room. "She belongs with me," he said simply. "And if this house can't accept her, then maybe we don't belong in this house either." Gasps rose across the room. Someone dropped their fork. His mother took a step back, speechless, and that's when he turned fully to her, his eyes calm now, disappointed more than angry. "You can think what you want, but if you ever humiliate her again," he stepped closer, voice like steel wrapped in velvet, "you'll have no place in our lives." Then, with the entire family watching, he looked her dead in the eye and said it, "Now kneel, and apologize." Her eyes widened, her pride warring with the silence that swallowed the room. For the first time, I saw fear in her face, not of me, but of losing him. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't the one who had anything to prove. She didn't kneel. Not right away. Her spine stiffened, hands clenching at her sides like someone trying to hold onto whatever control they had left. Around us, the guests pretended to adjust their silverware or sip from glasses, but no one dared interrupt. The moment hung in the air, suspended between tradition and a love that refused to bow. His mother's nostrils flared. "You would humiliate me? In front of everyone," she spat. "For a girl who doesn't even know which fork to use at a formal table." My chest tightened again, but this time I didn't look away. I didn't cry. I just stood there, wearing his jacket like armor. My fingers curled lightly around the lapel. I wasn't ashamed. I was loved. And that changed everything. He stepped forward, blocking her gaze from reaching me. "No," he said, steady. "You humiliated yourself. And her. And if you don't see the difference, maybe you've never understood what respect means." That silence returned heavier now. Not just awkward, it was expectant. She looked around, perhaps hoping for someone to speak up in her defense. But no one moved. Not a single cousin, not an aunt, not even her husband. They all avoided her eyes, because they knew she had crossed a line no title or bloodline could excuse. I saw the tremble in her lip as she turned her face slightly, blinking hard. Her voice cracked when she finally said, "If that's what you want." And then, with every eye watching, she lowered herself, knees brushing the polished floor, and whispered, "I'm sorry." The words barely left her lips, but they shattered the air like thunder. I stood frozen, not out of pride, but disbelief. She had knelt. She had actually said it, apologized to me, not as a gesture of politeness, but because her own son demanded it. His hand found mine again, warmer now, gentler. "You don't have to forgive her now," he whispered, only for me. "Or ever. That's up to you." I looked down at her, not with triumph, but with quiet wonder. She looked smaller somehow, not physically but in presence. This woman who once towered over every room with her icy smile, now looked like someone unraveling under the weight of her own bitterness. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to see her beg. What I had wanted all along was to be treated like I mattered. Not as a trophy, not as a secret, not as a mistake he would one day regret, just as someone worthy of standing beside him. He turned to the crowd now, not hiding anything. "I hope that's clear," he said calmly. "I love her, and anyone who disrespects her doesn't belong in our future." Someone clapped, soft, hesitant, then another, and then more. A ripple of unexpected approval moved through the guests. His mother slowly stood, avoiding my eyes, her pride bruised, her silence louder than her earlier insults. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. He wrapped his arm around me again, and for the first time since I'd entered that house, I felt the ground beneath my feet belonged to me. After that, everything changed. The dinner resumed, but nothing tasted the same. People spoke softer. Their glances were different, not sharp like before, but curious, even respectful. A few of them approached me during dessert, offering small compliments or harmless comments about the food or music. I knew what they were really doing, testing the waters, trying to reposition themselves now that I was no longer invisible. I remained polite, smiling when needed, answering briefly. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely, processing what had just happened, what it meant. He never left my side. Not once. He served me tea before I even asked. He wrapped the shawl tighter around my shoulders when the air turned cold. And every time our eyes met, he didn't need to say anything. I could feel it in the way he looked at me, like he saw all of me, even the parts one tried to hide. I glanced toward his mother once. She sat 2 seats away, back straight, lips tight, pretending to enjoy the rest of the evening. But her eyes flicked toward us every so often. I wondered what she saw now. Not a maid, not a scandal, but a woman her son chose, despite everything. And I didn't need her approval anymore. That realization felt like a door unlocking quietly inside me. I didn't belong to her world, But I also didn't need to, because he hadn't just defended me. He had declared, in front of everyone, that I was his world. And in a place where I once felt like a shadow, I now stood in full light. The next morning, I woke up in his apartment, sunlight filtering softly through the sheer curtains. The air smelled faintly of jasmine tea and fresh linen. For a brief second, I thought it had all been a dream, the ballroom, his mother's words, his voice echoing through the silence. But then I turned and saw his blazer draped carefully over a chair, the same one he had wrapped around me like a shield. The memories came rushing back, not like a storm, but like warmth. He had stood by me. In front of the people who mattered most to him, he chose me. I sat up slowly, running my fingers along the edge of the comforter, still unsure of what today would bring. Would his mother try to call? Would she pretend nothing happened? Would he regret what he said? Just as my thoughts spiraled, the door creaked open. He stepped in, still in his pajama shirt, holding 2 mugs. "You're awake," he said softly, setting one down beside me. "I wasn't sure you'd want to stay." I looked at him, surprised. "After last night?" He smiled faintly, then lowered himself beside me. I meant emotionally. Sometimes people disappear after feeling too seen. I blinked, unsure how to respond. No one had ever understood that part of me, the fear of being visible and then discarded. "I'm not going anywhere," I finally said, voice quiet. He nodded like he already knew. "Good," he whispered, reaching for my hand, "because neither am I." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. He took my hand and traced slow circles on my palm, as if grounding both of us in something real. There were no cameras now, no whispers behind champagne glasses. Just us, sitting on the edge of a morning that felt new. "You're still thinking about her," he said gently, not accusing, just knowing. I didn't deny it. "It's hard not to," I admitted. "She didn't just call me a maid. She said it like it was the only thing I could ever be." He nodded, his expression somber. "My mother measures people by how easily she can control them, but she can't do that to you. That's why she lashes out." I breathed in slowly. I didn't want to be defined by her. I didn't want to be angry, but something inside me still hurt deeply. "Do you think she'll ever accept me?" I asked, not expecting a fairy tale answer. He turned his body fully toward me. "I don't need her to. I just need you to know that I won't let her erase you. Not from my life. Not from my name." My throat tightened again, not from sadness this time, but from how fiercely he meant it. He saw all the pieces of me, past flaws, silence, resilience, and he wasn't afraid to love the whole. He leaned in, forehead resting against mine. "This isn't going to be easy," he said, "but I'll choose you every day, especially on the hard ones." And somehow, those words meant more than any perfect vow. They were messy, honest, unfiltered, and they were mine. Later that day, we walked through the city, hand in hand like any ordinary couple. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every step beside him now held weight, like I was stepping into a version of myself I'd always been too afraid to claim. The stares didn't bother me the way they used to. Whether it was whispers from strangers or curious glances from passerby, I didn't shrink anymore, because he never let go of my hand. Not once. We stopped at a little bookstore near the corner cafe we used to pass by but never entered. He nudged the door open for me and whispered, "Choose anything you want. Today is yours." It was such a small thing, but after years of never being allowed to want anything, it felt monumental. I wandered the aisles slowly, fingers brushing faded spines, until I found a worn poetry book with a pressed flower tucked inside. He smiled when I brought it to the counter. "That's exactly your style," he said. The woman ringing us up looked between us for a second, then said softly, "You two look like the kind of love that people read about in these pages." I didn't know what to say, but he did. He looked at me, not the past or the mess or the pain, but just me, and said, "She is my story." My heart swelled. Not because, he said it loudly, but because he meant it deeply. And that truth was louder than anything his mother had ever tried to shout over. The first time we returned to his family's house after that night, everything felt colder, even though the weather hadn't changed. The garden, once perfectly trimmed, looked untouched. The staff avoided eye contact, and the grand chandelier in the hallway flickered slightly, like even the electricity hesitated to be present. He held my hand tighter as we walked through the front doors, our footsteps echoing louder than I remembered. His mother wasn't in the drawing room, nor the dining hall. A maid whispered she was in the sunroom. "Should we go?" I asked, my pulse quickening. He glanced down at me. "We walk in together and we leave together. Always." I nodded, swallowing the nerves. When we entered the sunroom, I expected ice, distance, a glare. But instead, she sat alone, facing the garden, holding an old photograph. Her younger self, her late husband, and a boy who looked exactly like him. She didn't turn around immediately. "I used to think love was something you earned by being perfect," she said, voice low. "By hosting the right parties, wearing the right pearls, saying the right things." Silence. Then she turned slowly, eyes not soft, but no longer weaponized. "But my son never smiled like that until he met you." My breath caught. She stood, slow and deliberate, and walked over. Not with affection, but with restraint. "I won't pretend we're close, but I won't stand in the way anymore." It wasn't warmth, but it was no longer war. And somehow that space between us, still tense, still cautious, felt like the beginning of something truer than false peace. She extended her hand, not to shake, but to acknowledge. The gesture wasn't filled with love, but neither was it empty. It was her version of surrender, and I understood that. Sometimes people show respect in the only way they know how. I looked at her hand for a moment, then placed mine gently in hers. We didn't speak. We didn't smile, but something shifted in the air, subtle like a door, creaking open just enough to let light through. He stood beside us, watching, not interfering, not pushing, letting it be what it was. Two women who had once stood on opposite sides of the same man, now standing eye to eye. "I won't apologize again," she said, her voice firm. "But I won't insult you either. My son made his choice, and I will not embarrass him further." I nodded. "I'm not asking for your approval," I replied calmly. "Only for space to love him the way he deserves." A beat passed, then another. She finally exhaled. "Then perhaps we understand each other more than I thought." She turned away after that, slowly returning to her seat by the window. No more words. No dramatic reconciliation. But that wasn't what I needed. I didn't come looking for her blessing. I came so I could stop running from her shadow. As we walked back toward the car, his arm slipped gently around my waist. "You didn't just survive her," he whispered. "You stood your ground." And in that moment I realized I wasn't afraid of her anymore. Not even a little. Back in the car, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was reflective, soft. I leaned my head on his shoulder, still holding the poetry book from earlier like it was a shield. "You okay?" he asked, brushing my hair gently behind my ear. "Yeah," I murmured. "It's strange. I thought I'd feel more victorious, but all I feel is calm." He smiled, kissing the top of my head. "Because you didn't go there to win. You went there to be true to yourself." That stayed with me. All my life, I'd thought love was about proving myself, being enough, being better, being quiet, being useful. But he never asked for any of that. He just asked for me. Even in my fear, my doubt, my silence. And now, after standing before the woman who once saw me as disposable, I no longer needed to prove anything. I looked out the window at the city moving past us, people going about their lives, never knowing that just 2 hours ago I had stood in front of the very thing that once crushed my spirit and didn't break. "Thank you," I said softly, not for defending me, but for believing I was worth defending. He didn't respond with words. He simply laced our fingers together, like sealing a quiet promise. I realized then, Strength doesn't always look like shouting back. Sometimes it looks like standing still, like loving yourself enough not to run, like letting go of the need to be accepted, because the right love accepts you before the world ever does. The day we officially got engaged, it wasn't in a grand ballroom or surrounded by hundreds of guests. It happened in the rooftop garden of a quiet building he had renovated himself, a place he used to escape to when the world became too loud. He brought me there at sunset, the sky melting in hues of rose and gold, a gentle breeze tugging at the hem of my dress. "This is where I first pictured you wearing my name," he said almost shyly. "Not in front of cameras, not in suits and signatures, just you. Here." He knelt, not with a ring box, but with the very poetry book I had chosen weeks ago, the same one with the pressed flower. When he opened it, a small note was tucked inside. "Page 79, he whispered. I turned to the page with trembling fingers. He had written, "I want a life where the world calls you mine. But more than that, I want a life where you always feel like you belong to yourself first." My eyes burned. I looked down at him. "Is this your way of proposing?" He grinned. "I already called you my wife in front of my mother. This is just me asking if you'll let me keep saying it forever." I knelt too, unable to hold back the tears, and whispered, "Only if you promise to keep reading pages with me when we're gray and slow." He nodded, pulling me into his arms. "Always." And under the fading sun, we stayed like that, two imperfect people choosing each other in full bloom. Not long after, his mother sent us a gift. No note, no phone call, just a package wrapped in pale silver paper, delivered to the rooftop address only he and I shared. Inside was a tea set, white porcelain, rimmed with gold. The same one she used during her Sunday gatherings, the one no one else was ever allowed to touch. He stared at it in disbelief. She never lends this out, not even to her own sisters. I traced the edge of a cup, feeling the weight of what wasn't said. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't approval. But it was something. A gesture. A shift. That night, we brewed the first cup in silence. He poured and I served. We drank slowly, seated side by side beneath fairy lights strung along the railing. "You know," I said, cradling the cup, "a few months ago, I would have laughed if someone told me I'd be drinking tea from your mother's set." He chuckled. "A few months ago, I wasn't sure I'd ever hear her call you anything, but that girl." We clinked cups gently, a toast not to perfection, but to progress. And in that quiet moment, I realized that not all love stories need grand apologies or dramatic apologies to feel whole. Sometimes it's in the smallest shifts, the gentlest recognitions, that healing begins. That night, as we folded the wrapping paper and stored the set carefully on our shelf, I felt it. Not the end of a war, but the beginning of peace. And that, for once, was more than enough. Months passed, and life didn't become a fairy tale, but it became ours. We learned to build around the cracks. He still had tense phone calls with his mother, and I still hesitated at formal events. But we held each other through every quiet storm. One evening, during a gala at the company's new headquarters, I overheard someone whisper again, "Isn't she the maid he married?" For a split second, the old shame tried to rise, but then I felt his hand on my back, grounding me. He took the microphone during his speech and said, "Tonight, I want to honor the person who taught me what strength looks like in silence." He looked directly at me. She was never just anything. Not just a maid, not just a guest. She's the reason I am who I am today. Applause, stunned silence, and tears I didn't fight. Later that night, as we watched the city lights blink from our rooftop, he said something that stayed with me. Let them talk. Let them whisper. But let them know, when they look at you, they're looking at the love I chose above all else. I leaned into him, smiling, not because I needed those words to feel complete, but because they echoed everything I had once been too afraid to believe. I was never meant to be invisible. I was never meant to just clean around the edges of someone else's life. I was meant to be seen. And finally, in his eyes, in our story, I was